All right, here we go. Square dance callers talking tonight. First of all, let me say this. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speaker. So here we go. Because I am very opinionated on this gentleman. I think he's one of the finest callers on the planet, and he is a great friend. He may not have done everything in square dance calling, but he's pretty damn close. He owns record labels. He produces his own recordings. He produces other callers' recordings. He has taught countless dancers to dance. He is the gold standard of square dance callers. Don't stop me yet, Tony. Coaching square dance callers. He is an accredited Caller Lab caller coach. He has served on the board of Caller Lab for many years. He has the mecca of square dancing at Pride RV Resort in North Carolina. He is a square dance caller. He's a national caller. He's an international caller. And if intergalactic caller was a thing, he would be that also. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Oxendine. Tony, how are you, my friend?
Oh, man. Well, I was doing pretty good. You said all that. Now I'm going to try to live up to some of that.
But the intergalactic thing about 3 nights ago, and I said, I'm absolutely going that direction. Because if we had to put somebody on a spaceship to go find other life, I said, well, we got to put Tony there so he can explain square dance to him.
Sure, of
There's
course.
no better person for that. So wherever you want to start, Tony, you've got a lifetime of it. Where are you from? Where are you at? What's going on, buddy?
Oh, God. Let's see. I'm originally from Sumter, South Carolina, a little small town right in the center of the state. It's the home of Shaw Air Force Base, which is one of the larger, at one time was the largest Air Force base in the country.
Okay.
And pretty much that's a lot of Sumter's, the air base. Started dancing there when I was a teenager. I worked for the Parks and Recreation Department, did volunteer work for them with teenagers, and worked at one of the local youth centers. And one summer they had square dancing, and so I don't know how, and I have no idea how it developed that we decided to have square dancing so we decided we need to find a caller, and so we found this. He was a dancer, wasn't even a caller. But he agreed to teach us. He had never taught. And his name was John Davis, and great guy. I mean, just a great, great guy. He and his wife both, they owned a local bakery. Anyway, and so we started dancing. We danced every night we danced every day, every afternoon. So we graduated in a month.
Okay.
But we danced 5 days a week. So we danced, and so we graduated a month or 5 weeks or so. And it was, in the course of a summer. And anyway, it was kind of cool because he wasn't a caller. And so he didn't know how to resolve. So I never knew. And through lessons, I never knew that you were supposed to get the same girl each time. When he said, okay, you got the same, because we just Allemande left with whoever he said. Mm-hmm. And then you promenaded with whoever you got. And so I didn't, until we heard some other callers call, we never knew that you were supposed to get the same person each time. He could not sing. I think he eventually learned one singing call. I can't. It was Folsom Prison Blues, I think was okay. And but he didn't do singing calls. So again, I didn't, until we heard other callers, we didn't know that singing calls were part of it too much. Eventually, that's where I started, because at that time I was in a band, and so then I learned to do a couple of singing calls. And so then the way it would work, he would do the pattern, they get all mixed up, and then we'd get back home, and then I would do a singing call. So I learned, I don't know, about a half dozen singing calls. We weren't buying any. These were old records he had that I guess he got from somebody, because we weren't buying any records back then. Right. I think the first song I learned to sing was a song called "Whisper Sweet Nothings in Your Baby's Ear," and it was on I think it was Longhorn label, which you've never heard of.
Nope.
Because it hasn't been around in 45 years or so. It was an offshoot of K-Lox, which you haven't heard of either. But back in the 60s and 70s, especially the 70s, K-Lox was a pretty big label back in those times. And then they had secondary labels underneath them. So Longhorn was a secondary label under K-Lox. Okay. You've never heard of either one of those?
No, sir, I have not.
And there's a lot of those labels came in that were really big back then that just went away. The producer passed away or something, and they just kind of went away. Mm-hmm. But there were just all kind of. But anyway, then back in the summer of '74, I started dancing in '72, And so in the summer of 74, he decided, Mr. Davis decided he wanted to learn more about calling. And so he found a caller school. There was none locally that we knew of. And he found one in Maryville, Indiana. And so he said, Tony, I'll pay for it if you go. I said, sure. So I went with him to the caller school. And I knew at that time, I knew one or two singing calls, and that was it. I knew no pattern. And bear in mind, now this was at a time back then too. Now that patter wasn't as important. That you didn't have many. There weren't many sight callers, and so you didn't see the exotic choreography that you see now. It was you never saw guys didn't change the figure for the singing calls. Whatever figure was on the singing call, that's the figure that you used always. There were one or two guys scattered about, but by and large, most of the guys that we saw, the club callers that we saw in South Carolina, that's the way they called. And so we went there, and that's where I met. That it was staffed by Dick Jones, Johnny Davis, Dick Han, and Rich Shaber, and all of those guys have passed away now. But Dick Jones was at that time one of the premier national callers. I mean, he was really, really big time. And I never knew that you could sing and do things like that. He did everything. He sang, he yodeled, he whistled, and so that's who I started copying when I first started calling. That's the person I emulated. So when I came back home, me and this buddy of mine, because I didn't have much of a car back then because the band, we weren't making a whole lot of money. So I had a 66 Chevelle. This would have been in 74.
Okay.
And I had a 66 Chevelle. Wow. That was ragged out. It was, but anyway, but it was, you couldn't take it. You didn't want to take it and drive it to North Carolina. But I had this buddy of mine that was an airman on the base. In fact, he and I are still close friends. I just saw him a couple of weeks ago to dance. His name was Joe Maxim. And he had a new car. He had a Barracuda.
Wow. Okay.
And so he and we started it wasn't anything for us to go on a Tuesday night to drive to Wilmington, North Carolina, Fayetteville, to see Dick Jones call and dance to him. And then I would tape him on a reel-to-reel.
Yep.
And then we'd drive back home, and I'd go to school the next morning. We'd drive back 3 or 4 or 5 hours. I'd get home at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm up at 8, and I'd have school the next day. We did that for the longest time. And but that's where I started copying, and still to this day, a lot of the routines and stuff that I do now is stuff that I stole way back then.
That's awesome, man. And of course, all those callers are gone now because I ask everybody who their influences are. And because we pattern, even though everybody's got their own style, and you absolutely have your own style, just like everybody else that have been doing it for a good while. So you have your influences, and you kind of pattern yourself after someone. And I've absolutely I've grabbed a lot of stuff thanks to YouTube from you, Ted, Justin, Scott Bennett. I see y'all doing patter. Trust me, it's popping up somewhere in Kennesaw about a week later. So the hard part about yours is you do a lot of explaining while you're doing it, and it's very smooth because it's your way. When I go out there and throw out something like the ladies run this way, it just doesn't work because I haven't worked them to that point. And that's something that you've taught me over the years at schools and what have you. And just talking, you got to build dancers up to a certain point, even to dance. And so that's something I've learned the hard way a couple of times. You can't go in cold and say, all right, ladies, cross run right to the ends there, you're good. And that's not going to work.
Oftentimes I'll spend, we'll spend an entire tip or maybe several tips to work parts of one routine so that you can do the complete routine 3 or 4 tips later.
Gotcha. Yep.
So that, you build parts of it up. It's hard to explain that to guys because they see the end result and they don't see what led up to it. And so then when you try to do it cold without having worked the parts beforehand, and you just try to do the end result, a lot of times people miss it because sometimes it's too hard.
Yeah, I know.
Or too different,
With a mic in my hand, I've seen that happen.
Happens to all of us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we went through that. Your beginnings So you went on the road. So this has been what you've done your whole life. Tell me about the road, man.
Well, I was in a band in the 70s, and I was in college, and eventually it got to be I was calling, and then eventually I started calling for clubs when I came back, and I had 4 or 5 clubs at one time, and so I found myself calling every night of the week. Now back then, clubs didn't dance every week. Most of the clubs in South Carolina at that time danced every other week. So you'd have first and third Tuesdays and second and fourth Tuesdays and first and third Wednesday, that kind of deal. So I could have 4 clubs and not occupy every night of the week, essentially. And so then I got to the point that I was enjoying calling more than I was enjoying being in the band. Kind of like it was, in the band we were good, but we were never going to be anywhere. It was that kind of deal. We were good and we played locally, but that was about all. And I got to where I was really enjoying the calling, and I wasn't traveling at the time. I wasn't, because I was in, I would get the occasionally Friday or Saturday night booking that I could, drive out and drive back. I remember my first time I flew anywhere was 1980.
Okay.
The first time anybody paid me, they paid my airfare. And that was at a dance in West Virginia.
Okay.
And the gentleman hired me. He flew me to Charleston, West Virginia, and I think maybe paid me $75 for the dance. And probably airfare back then would have been $75 or so, I guess. That year I had 2 dances, because I also did the New Orleans Festival, right, which they flew me in. So I had 2 dances that paid airfare. But typically I didn't make a decision to go full time until 1980. Okay. So I called. So there for a lot of years, or for 5 or 6 years, I had clubs. So I was calling club dances Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I would leave and call Friday, Saturday, weekends. Friday and Saturday, come back home on Sunday, or sometimes call on Sunday, and then come back Monday and go back to school on Monday, because I'm still going to school full time. Mm-hmm. And then I'm working every night. I had one of my clubs was 2 hours away. My every other Thursday night club. I forget if they were first and third or third and third. But one of my clubs on Thursday night was 116 miles away, so it was a 2-hour drive. Wow. Because back then, that was when the speed limit was 55.
Yep.
And so it was a 2-hour drive, and we danced until 10, or maybe we might dance until 11, because back then people danced 3 hours, so we may have danced 8 to 11. So I'm getting home at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then getting up and going to school. So I'm burning up the roads, man. I'm just tearing up the roads, just driving every day. My nearest club was Hartsville, South Carolina, which was 40 minutes away, 40 miles away. And then I had a club in Columbia, which was an hour away. I had a club in Myrtle Beach, which was 2 hours away. And then I had a club in Clinton, South Carolina, which is up near Spartanburg, that was 2 hours away.
Okay.
So I'm doing lessons for these guys too, so I got these clubs, and so it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every 11 week. I'm just calling and loving it. Yep. But it's killing me, man. Trying to go to school the next morning. It was so cool back then, because if you think about it, you're never going to make a lot of money calling back then. It was just, I'm calling these club dances, and I'm making $30, $40, $50 a night calling for a club. Well, heck, the minimum wage back then was $1.60. So I'm making, I'm bringing home. I'm bringing home what I would bring in a day, what I'd bring home in a week, because gas wasn't so bad back then. So it was really good. And then I started going. I found I'd book an occasional Friday and Saturday, and so I'd call a dance in Asheville, North Carolina, and then somebody from Knoxville would be at the dance, and they would hire me to come back up there. And back then. Now they hire you 2 and 3 years ahead. Right. And they hired you 2 or 3 months. So then they'd hire me. So here I go, then 2 months later, I've got a dance and I do a Friday night dance in Asheville. And then Saturday I go to Knoxville. Well, then somebody in Chattanooga was at the Knoxville dance. So then I find myself going to, so it keeps branching out, and I keep adding, so then I got to where, well, I'll schedule this semester. I'll do my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because that was the way classes worked back at University of South Carolina. Yep. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you had Tuesday, Thursday classes. So I started scheduling all of my classes on Tuesday and Thursday. So I had long days on Tuesday and Thursday, but I was off on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So then I could now call on Sunday. So now I could call Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and come home on Monday, and then go to school on Tuesday all day, and then call Tuesday night, and then call Wednesday night, and then all day school on Thursday, and then Friday I could drive out again. And so I kept going further and further away, and so it wasn't anything for me to do a dance on Saturday night or Sunday night and drive 7 or 8, 10 hours back home. But I was young back then; I could do that.
Yeah.
And I'm too old for that now. But I can't tell you the number of times that I did that. So, and then in 1980. It's when I decided to pursue it full time, and so then I started going. Then I started touring, where you get in your car and you drive. You're gone a month or 6 weeks, and you go all the way out to the West Coast and come back, or you go all the way up north and come back south.
Wow.
And so then I'm working. And back then I was working 300 days a year. Maybe a little more, but I was working almost every night of the week. 7 days a week, and just bouncing around and getting home once every 6 weeks, 7 weeks.
That's amazing. That's a great story. Gosh,
I was driving in excess of 100,000 miles a year.
Jeez.
I bought my first new car in 1978, and I bought an Olds 98.
Okay.
Red. I remember that.
Very nice. Okay.
And I drove it a year, and I had 100-something thousand miles on it. I had to trade it in. And when you drive a car 100,000 miles, it's not worth anything. Now,
Right.
cars weren't so expensive back in those days, but it was I'm going through a car a year, just burning them up. And it wasn't just me. I got friends the same way. Larry Lesson's doing the same thing. Story was doing the same thing back in those days. Along with the big guys.
You know what the most amazing thing of that, because even at my age now, and I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Oh well, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. Cars broke down. Nowadays, cars really don't break down. Some will, but if you change oil in a car, it'll go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years without really a problem. Back then, little wear and tear, you're going to break a car down.
And you got to change the oil every 2,000 or 3,000 miles, 250 miles.
The suspensions weren't made the same. You beat a car to death in a year putting 100,000 miles. You're not going to get any more life out of it. That's amazing.
My very first cross-country tour was in 1976. And at that time, I had a 1973 Monte Carlo, Chevy Monte Carlo, 2-door. And I had, let me back up a little bit. My first national convention that I went to was in 75.
Okay.
I went to college school in 74. 75, I went to my first national convention in Kansas City. And I met the people running the thing. I mean, I'm a hotshot young guy, long hair. I had long hair. I had, back then I had like really long hair.
Okay.
I cut my hair in 1976. I know these dates. And my hair was almost, when I cut it, it was almost to my waist when I cut it in 76. But even back then, it was down my back. And so I was the weird looking Indian kid that could sing and couldn't do no hash, but it didn't matter back then.
Right.
So that was the first year that Hilton came out with the 300 amplifier.
Okay.
And it was the first year of it. And he had troubles with it. They were overheating, and back then Hilton, Jim Hilton supplied the sound for the National Convention. So he had, I don't know, dozens of these amplifiers. Well, they kept blowing up. The circuit would whatever the circuitry would blow up, and it would heat up, it'd overheat and cut off. Anyway, so I bought one that was blown up, wouldn't play, and it was $600.
Oh my gosh.
And never forget. Now, wait a minute. I didn't have $600.
Okay.
Remember the buddy of mine I told you that had the Barracuda?
Mm-hmm.
He was an airman in the Air Force.
Okay.
So he loaned me the money to buy my first amplifier that year at that national convention. And the way I paid him back was that I would give him 40% of everything I made calling until I paid it off. And that was the arrangement we had. So I wound up buying 2 Hilton speakers, 2 of those great big old stands, and a Hilton 300 at that national convention in '74. And so now in '75, '6, I'm calling for clubs, and I'm able to pay everything back. And I traded my '66 Chevelle, and I got a '73 Monte Carlo, which is a big step up.
Yeah, that's nice.
So my first cross country tour, we were in my Monte Carlo, and it was in June of '76. And my first cross country tour, my first dance was in Kentucky, outside of Lexington, Kentucky, at Levi Jackson State Park, which is near Lexington.
Okay.
And it was a Saturday night. I made $75. My next dance was a week later, the next Saturday, in Omaha, Nebraska. Fortunately, I have relatives that lived in Omaha, so we left there on Sunday and drove to Omaha, and we stayed with my cousin for a week.
Okay.
And I did a Saturday night dance in Omaha. And then I get maybe a Wednesday or Thursday dance in Denver. So we left Omaha, drove 10 hours to Denver to find out that, Tony, you should get contracts for these things, because I didn't have a dance.
Oh, no way.
So here we are in Denver. Now, thus far, and wait a minute, I had a dance in Omaha. I made $75. So thus far, I've been gone 10 days and I've made $150. And so we go to Denver, didn't have a dance. So we go to a dance and we dance. I get to call a tip, And so we leave, this buddy of mine and I, and we're running short of money now. So we decide to leave after the dance. So we're driving that night.
Okay.
And we get through a little town called Rifle, Colorado, which is up in the mountains. I'm in the back seat asleep in my Monte Carlo, and he's driving. He goes to sleep. He runs off the side of a mountain. So off we go down the side of a mountain, and it blows all 4 tires, and it bends the rim. We run over rocks and stuff going down this mountain, and we bent the rims, and then we knocked a hole in the gas tank, where the gas tank had a big V in it. So you could only run about a quarter of a tank of gas. So we finally get down, and I got clothes and things are falling all over me in the back seat. And anyway, so we get out, and he has an Exxon. We don't have a credit card. I don't have a credit card. He has an Exxon card. And so we find an Exxon gas station, and they had ties to a junkyard. So we got 4 junk rims, and we put 4 tires on the car, and that pretty much ate up what we had on the Exxon card. But we got the car working. But now my car, I can only access the top quarter of the gas tank. So I can only run a quarter of a tank of gas at the time. Now we're in Colorado on our way to Anaheim, California, which means you got to go across the desert. So here we are going across the desert at a quarter of a tank a time. So we'd have to stop regularly and get gas. We made it to Vegas. I got to see the lights of Vegas, but we couldn't stop because we didn't have any money, pretty much.
Okay.
We get to Anaheim where the national convention is, and we'd already paid for the hotel room. Back then you paid in advance for things. Mm-hmm. So we'd already paid for the hotel room. So that was all paid for. So we get to the nationals and we have a great time. And then we take some dancers back to the airport on Sunday night after the convention. And then we leave because I have a dance now on Tuesday. This is Sunday. I'm in Los Angeles, Anaheim. My Tuesday night dance is in Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So off we go, driving nonstop, quarter of a tank of gas a time from Anaheim to Lake Charles. And so we flip-flop driving, and we couldn't stop. I mean, we left LAX at about 9 o'clock on Sunday night, and we pulled into these people's house in Lake Charles at like 1 o'clock Tuesday afternoon. I do a Tuesday dance, and I make $75 that night. Had about 20 squares. Bear in mind, now I had about 20 squares. But back then they're paying like $1 a person or $1 a couple. Anyway. So I do the dance, and the next day, on Wednesday, we drive back to South Carolina. quarter of a tank of gas at the time. So make a long story short, I was gone 2.5 weeks. I went all the way to California and back. I had a total of 3 dances. My first cross-country tour, we drove about 5,000 miles. I had 3 dances and made a total of $225.
Oh my gosh.
That was my first tour. That's honest to goodness truth.
That is fantastic. Gosh. Man, that you won't hear any more stories like that. Not anymore with the callers today, you know.
You can't.
It's a shame.
Yeah, it is. For the guys like Hunter and Justin and these guys that were getting out and starting to travel, and yeah, it's those days they may come back.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? May come back, but right now it's not a good climate to try to get in your car and drive around and make money calling square dances.
Yeah,
it's not a good climate for it right now. I think you could do it. I'm not going to get in my car and drive all over the world again. I'm too old. But I think if a guy was talented enough, and there are guys out there doing it. There's guys out there still driving and making, they're not setting the woods on fire, but they're making a living. I think you can go out and you can make a living doing it. It'd be tough.
Yeah.
You'd be working hard, and you'd have to sacrifice. You'd have to stay with people instead of staying in hotels.
Yeah.
And you couldn't drive a gas-eating big old, SUV. There's ways around it, but I think you could.
That's the biggest thing I find just around, like when I just go into Florida or whatever. If you want to stay in a halfway decent hotel, it's $200 a night, and
yes,
and you're not going to make that much at most dances sometimes. So it's tough. It would certainly be a lot of work to get out there and do that.
When I used to travel, what I would do, there was a couple of trips that we used back in the day, back in the 80s, when the Fairfield Inn that was just starting. They used to put an ad in USA Today, and you could, 1 month it would be $25 or $30, and they had these coupons that you could get a Fairfield Inn for either $25 or $30. So what I would do is then I would go buy 30, 40 newspapers, USA Today's, because back then they were a dime, 15 cents. And clip that thing out on the back, so then I could stay in a kind of a nice hotel for $30. What I would do oftentimes, because I've had my share of staying in hotels where the rent by the hour kind of place. You hear the coming and going both sides, and what I would do a lot of times is, like you say, I would drive to Atlanta and call a dance for you, and my next dance would be let's say in Louisville. So then I would leave the dance with you at 11 o'clock on Saturday night. And then I would drive all the way to Louisville and get there at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I would check into that hotel in Louisville and check it at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I can get 2 nights sleeping. So then I sleep for a couple of hours. I go out and clown around, do my dance in Louisville, then drive to wherever my dance is the next day, but then drive back to Louisville, drive back to that hotel. Okay. So I could stay in the same hotel, sleep twice for the price of one night, essentially. But I got to drive all night to get there. But we had to do stuff like that.
Yeah, no. It's you got to be creative, man, for sure.
Yeah, or you're staying in. I'm staying. I can remember. I don't stay with people anymore. That even my friends joke with me because I go visit my kids. All of my kids live out of town. If I go visit my kids, I stay in a hotel room. So I don't stay with anybody. So none of my friends can get mad at me for not staying with them if I go visit. And now they visit me. I just don't like staying with people. So I stay in hotels. But back then that wasn't the case. I would stay with people, and I've had just some terrible experiences staying with people. I'll never forget. I was staying with these people. I forget what it was. I think it might have been in Florida. And I did the dance, and we go out after, you always go out afterwards and eat, so you go out and you eat, and then we come back and we talk and we yada, yada. And I go back and I'm in this room and it's dark, it's pitch black, dark room. Well, I guess the door is cracked and they have a cat. I don't know they have a cat. Apparently I'm in the cat's room. And in the middle of the night, and they got this, it's a big cat. In the middle of the night, this cat just jumps up on the bed onto my chest. And I wake up in a pitch black room. I've got this weight on my chest. I feel this fur, and I almost panicked. That's a scary feeling.
Yeah.
I stayed with people. I just don't stay with people anymore.
I understand. No.
I've had some really. I stayed with these people one time, and I got there. I got to we did the dance, and well, I came to they took me to his house before the dance, and they were doing construction on his house, and they lived in a split level. So if you walk in, you have an option of walking up or down. Well, everybody was down. Everything was down there. So they had a kitchen down there. They had a couple of bedrooms, and this was in December, the latter part of December, right? Maybe the 20th or so, getting close around Christmas time.
Okay.
Go down there, and the lady is they got this great big German Shepherd that stays in the house, and the lady is taking Thanksgiving turkey and carving it for dinner that they had in the refrigerator. Now this is the 20th or so of December, and she's carving Thanksgiving turkey that's a month old. And so she's and I'm a dog lover now. So I have a dog in here in the office with me out, but so she's petting the dog and then carving the turkey and petting the dog and carving. And I'm thinking, well, now I got to figure. So I know I'm not going to eat, so then I tell the people, listen, I don't eat for a dance. And so we go do the dance, and man, I'm starving by the time. And so then I know. And I come back and they want me staying in this room. It's obviously the dog's room. There's dog hair all over the bed, and it's just terrible. And I finally just told my guys, listen, I'm flying out of here in the morning. Just take me to the airport, and I'm going to stay in the airport tonight.
Okay.
And so that's what they did, and they got mad at me, which is okay, I guess, but I spent the night in a chair in the airport, and flew out the next morning. So no, I don't do that. You're right. Hotel rooms are scary. God, we're just in New York. The rooms in New York are just unbelievable.
Are they?
Ooh, man. I mean, you won't get anything for $200 a night. $300, $400.
Oh yeah. No, not in the city.
No, man. We were at. I mean, right now we were in Times Square. I mean, right where everything's happening.
Oh gosh.
Oh, we had a good time. We had a good time.
That's awesome, man. And that was just vacation.
She just went down. My wife loves New York, and so we went down. We saw a show. We saw Neil Diamond's Neil Diamond story. It's called "A Beautiful Noise."
Okay.
Saw that, and then we went out and we had German one night, and then the next night we had Chinese, and the next day we went to the show, and then we came home.
Outstanding.
And we did the tourist thing. We took a bus trip around New York, and we did the whole tourist thing. It was fun.
And it's good that you get out and you do stuff not square dance. And I like to ask too, just so traveling, that's your pastime. You like to get out, not square dancing.
Yes, Kim and I we like concerts, so we travel around a lot to concerts. One of the benefits of traveling a lot is that you accrue a ton of air miles.
Yeah.
And hotel nights.
Okay.
Yeah, I learned a long time ago as far as travel is concerned, I concentrate on one airline, one hotel, one car rental agency. Since everything, pretty much everything's the same price. Most airlines, they're within dollars of one another, and comparable hotels are within dollars of one another, and same with rental cars. So I go for the perks.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I have a lot between the two of us, because she goes with me. We have a lot of air miles and a lot of hotel miles. So we cash in miles, and we'll go somewhere to see a concert that we like. So there have been times this year that I was talking to somebody the other day, just on at least 2 occasions this year, we've done 3 concerts in 3 states in 6 days.
Very nice.
Well, we work hard. We work hard, and that's what we like to do with our. A lot of some people buy fancy jewelry and everything, and we like concerts. So we go and see the groups that we like to go see, and like some groups that I don't like. I like some groups that she doesn't like, and we just kind of go with each other.
Back and forth, very nice. It's better than going to a movie. Going to a concert is much better, I think.
No, we go to movies too. We have a movie night about once a week. We have a movie.
So now, and I started asking folks that, what's some of your favorite movies? What's your genre of movies?
My favorite movie of all time is called The Cutting Edge. Probably never heard of it.
No, but I will after tonight. The Cutting Edge.
The Cutting Edge. It's about a hockey player that got injured,
Uh-huh.
and an Olympic ice skater, and the two of them get together.
Okay.
And you just froze on me.
All right. Had a little bit of internet issue there for a minute on my part. Tony, you were telling me about the Cutting Edge movie that is your favorite.
But it is. It was, like I say, it's about a hockey player who got injured. I think maybe he hurt his eye or something, and an Olympic figure skater. And the cool thing about this movie is they never kiss. You know they're going to get together. It's one of those love stories. It's like a romantic comedy. You know they're going to get together. They don't get together until the very last 2 minutes of the movie, and they finally kiss at the very last. And so, I mean, it's stretched out. One of my favorite movies. That one and The American President is probably my other favorite one.
American President? Okay.
Yeah.
President.
Although I just watched one on the plane today that was really good. Tom Hanks, A Man Called Otto. That was pretty good.
I know the one you're talking about. I have not seen that either.
Oh, but it's sad.
Is it?
Oh, I hate sad movies.
I'm not going to watch that on the way to Reno. I'm not going to start off the weekend with that. So,
when are you coming?
well, we're going to Color Lab, of course, in Reno.
On Saturday?
Yes.
Okay.
We're coming out. We'll come out Saturday. Are you going out before that?
Well, yeah. I was originally coming out on Saturday, and it was one of those. You open your mouth and here you go. I was talking to some friends of mine back in January, I guess, or maybe February. And they're from Vegas. I've been knowing these guys for 30, 40 years. Great guys. And they're about to square up and came to the weekend I did. And we got to talking about Color Lab in Reno. And they said, well, listen, you come to Reno, you should come and call for us in Vegas. I said, well, I'd love to. Because I'm thinking to myself, well, it'd be easy to get from home to Vegas to Reno back. It'd be easy. Mm-hmm. And it just wasn't. It was trying to get a flight flying to Vegas was easy enough. I can fly nonstop to Vegas. Is getting from Vegas, because my original intent was, well, okay, I'll come and do this dance on Saturday night, and then I'll drive up to Reno on Sunday.
Okay.
Because I got to be there at 12 o'clock for board of governor meeting. Well, heck, it's almost an 8-hour drive.
Yeah, it's not short.
So then I said, well, so I started looking at airfares, and on American, if I flew on American, I'd have to leave at like dark 30, and then go to Phoenix, and then barely make it into Reno in time. The other option was to fly on one of the I forget which one it was now, the Spirit or Blue.
Oh,
what's the blue one? Anyway,
yeah.
$49. I thought, well, no, that's not bad. Nonstop. I said, that's not bad. But then they charge you like $100 for a carry-on and another $150 for your suitcase. I thought, well, then it's not that good of a deal. And so I was looking on Expedia trying to figure out something. Well, wound up for some reason Expedia and stuff, they don't put Southwest flights on there. For what reason, I don't know. Okay. But I got to think. I thought, thinking to myself, I said, well, maybe Southwest flies. And so I checked. Well, sure enough, Southwest flies nonstop from Vegas to Reno. So I was able to get a reasonable flight at a relatively reasonable time. So it'll work out great. I'm gonna get to go and see some good friends of mine, and call. I haven't called in Vegas in, gosh, the last time I called in Vegas, Charlotte was in the Super Bowl, whatever year that was.
Okay, that's been a couple of years. That's nice.
So it's been a while since I've been to Vegas. So I won't get a chance to do anything because I'm going to fly, get there like mid-afternoon, and then I call that night. Then I got to go to bed because I got to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning so to catch a flight.
And Color Lab's busy for you for sure.
It'll be okay.
So, tell me, record labels. How many do you have right now?
Well, I only have Royal. Ted and I have Total.
Total, yep.
Which you've done one on Total.
Yes, sir.
That's the only ones I.
Okay.
I've been associated with Royal now since the mid '80s when me and Jerry Story started it back in '85, I guess.
Okay. And you've put out Well, I say countless. That's a ridiculous word. Obviously, you could count how many, but you've put out a lot of recordings on your label and on other people's labels.
I've recorded on a lot of labels.
Right. What just to throw it out there, just off the top of your head, what are some of your favorites that you've done?
The favorites that I've recorded. Mm-hmm. My first would probably always be my favorite. It was also my hardest, and okay. It's one you've never heard of.
What was it?
It was on Ranch House, which back in the day, back in the 80s was in the 70s was a big label back then. It was one of the major labels, and the song was called Hitchhike.
Hitchhike. Okay.
And you've never heard of it?
Nope.
It was recorded by oh shucks, I forget who even did it now. But it took me forever to do the vocal. I mean, we were in the studio a half a day because I kept messing up the vocal. It was here again. You remember when I told you when we were talking earlier that I back in '74 and I went to color school and I didn't do much patter. Well, this is 1976 and I'm still not doing a whole lot of patter. I can do singing calls now, but I didn't have a whole lot of patter. And so then when Daryl McMillan asked me to come down and do a vocal, and I mean that was a big deal back then. This would have been 1976, so that was a major thing to be on a recording label, especially one of the big ones back then. And so he wanted me to come in and call a dance on set beforehand. I said, okay. Then I'm a bucket of nerves because, okay, here this is 76 now. So I am flying to Panama City Beach, Florida.
Okay.
So now I'm thinking, well, I don't want to ask him if he's going to have equipment. So I carry my amplifier, so I can carry one of these big old Hilton 300s, and my record case. I got my Hilton in my record case, hoping he's got a speaker, and knowing that my hash was just, I'm thinking he's going to hear my hash, and he's not going to want me to record for him,
right?
Because back then, like I say, patter wasn't important to most dancers. They weren't as choreographically conscious as they are now. But good callers knew good choreography, and Daryl was a great caller back then, still is. And so he's going to know that I can't call a damn lick. I can sing, and that's it. But I got through the dance, and we went to the studio, and we just over and over and over, and it took me forever to put the vocal down on this thing. But that'll probably always be my favorite because it was my first.
Right. Okay.
And I can remember it. I can remember the studio. I can remember the drive down to the studio because it was about an 80-mile drive to the studio. And sitting in the car with Daryl talking, and I'm just nervous, and it was a real experience back then.
Well, go ahead.
My second one would probably be one of the first ones that Jerry and I guess Brown Eyes, the first one we did on Royal. Back then we went just dumber than two rocks. We didn't know a thing about doing music. We didn't know a thing. And Brown Eyes. I take that back. Brown Eyes was not the first one we recorded. The first one we recorded was Morning Sky.
Morning Sky. Okay.
I think that was the first one. It might have been Brown Eyes. There's one of those. Back. There's one of those. But that would have been that first session when we did Brown Eyes and Morning Sky and The Pride Is Back, which didn't sell. That was the first one I did by myself on Royal. It was called The Pride Is Back. And if we hadn't destroyed them, there was probably more records after. It didn't sell anything, and I think it reproduced. I think there was more around at the end than we pressed at the beginning. But
wow.
But that whole session that was real special.
Well, if I can, I'm certainly not trying to pass anything on to you, but let me say this: if you could have told that story to me when I went to your first with TOTL, if you could have told me the story about you having trouble with the vocals, that would have gone a long way with me before I went into the studio with you. Because and people wouldn't know this, but to keep me level, to keep me where I'm at, you were in the other one singing in my ear the song that I was recording, just so I would stay there. So I was a bundle of nerves, so I understand that. But your next school coming up next year, if you could pass that on to one of the callers, that'd be great.
It's you get a little jaded, and I do forget how intense that is for guys that have never been in the studio. That's a lot to that's overwhelming. It's a lot to comprehend at one time.
It is.
Yeah.
And just with no musical ability, I can't play an instrument or anything like that. And I've been learning to call for 10 years now. And going out there, sitting with you and Ted, Scott and Shauna, watching the band put the music together the first night, and then us every day working on lyrics and working on just calling stuff. And then it's like, hey, this is it. This is what you came here for. And you walk into that booth, and there's 5 or more people staring at you from the other side, and you're just like, where am I? I don't know what I sound like. So it is nerve wracking for sure. I will say this: I couldn't have had a better time. It was one of the best weeks I've spent in all the years that I've had now in calling. We're getting to record a song and putting it out, having you and Ted there, who that I can't tell you what the respect is, but it's just there's no higher level. And to have you all there to be on the first song that I ever did was phenomenal. And I know all the other callers that were there feel the same way. And I'll tell you that. So,
that tune, that whole session, there's a lot more to it. Nowadays, anybody, there are just a ton of people recording music now because music it's from years past. It's a lot cheaper now to make music than it's ever been.
Yep.
But back when I first started, the only place you found music, you had to get live pickers, live bands, and you went to Nashville or like Wade had a band in Houston. And there were a couple of other guys that like Mac Lesson had a band down in Muscle Shoals, but that was where you found the musicians, and recording music back then was it was expensive to do the music, and then it was expensive to produce the music, putting it on vinyl. That was an expensive process too. And so you didn't have as many people recording back then as you do now. Now there are a lot of guys recording, but you were very fortunate, in fact, because I'm biased. Naturally, I'm biased.
Okay.
But I think the best square dance music in the world comes from Nashville, Tennessee.
Absolutely.
That's not a slam on any other label. That's just one man's opinion, and admittedly, I'm biased. But I think there is a sound that comes from those studios in Nashville when you have the live pickers picking together, and when it all comes together, and to try to explain this to somebody that has never seen it, it's people don't believe when you tell them, okay, listen, these guys are going to I'm going to play a song that they've never heard, and this guy's going to give them a piece of paper that's got numbers on it. It's not notes; it's going to be numbers, and they're going to hear this tune one time. They're going to go back, and then they're going to play it, and they're going to play it most of the time. They play it perfectly the first time.
Absolutely. Yep.
And the only time, and so we very seldom we have to do what's called overdubbing. We have to come back and have somebody go back and do their part over. Generally, when they do it the first time, it's done. And then the only thing you have to add then would be if someone's adding new fills or new leads or something. But there's very little overdubbing that has to be done. But to explain that to people, so your experience in recording music is different than 99% of the callers that have been out there now that have never experienced going into a professional studio with professional musicians. These are the guys, when you walked in and your fiddle player is the current CMA Musician of the Year.
Yep.
You've got your bass player was one of the original bassists on all of the Alabama songs. These guys, there's a litany of the guys that they have played with. For many years, our drummer, he's no longer our drummer, but for many years, our session drummer was the drummer for Bye Bye Miss American Pie. What's his name?
You froze me. Don McLean.
The same drummer. These, and all of these guys, when you go in the studio and you listen to these guys, when you hear the fiddle player talking, well, yeah, I was just talking to Blake the other day.
Yeah.
And you realize he's talking about Blake Sheldon.
Yeah.
Or she's saying, because she also plays with the rock and roll group.
Aerosmith. Steven Tyler.
Yeah.
His solo. Yep.
Yeah. And like, you know, the first time we went in, she's talking to Steven Tyler. She says, hell, I'm doing square dancing. You know, and so that's to be in that environment.
Yeah. And walk right.
But 90% of the callers in the world have never seen something like that. Right. You know, a lot of the guys that do music now, they do it without ever having seen the inside of a studio. They know people that know people, which is the way you do. That's the way you do business now. You know, you know somebody that knows somebody that can do this, and you don't need to be there now.
Right.
Whereas if you go a square dance song and he can do it, you know, you don't need to be there holding his hand, and he puts out a quality product. I mean, it's a great product, and a lot of producers are using him now. But a lot of these guys that are using these, they've never seen the inside of a studio to see how it actually works and watch the guy actually move the knobs and do everything, and watch the guys physically play, and then that's the
musicians. The artist of the year is playing on fiddle my song that I've picked out, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, wait, I'm the guy that was on the documentary. You know, of course, I'm not Steven Tyler, but that being said, I'm sitting there watching all this happen, and then, you know, then I'm putting lyrics on it, and it's a hell of a week. It's a good time. And so you got another one coming up. When is it? May of next year or March?
May of this year.
May of this year.
Yeah, it's Memorial Day weekend. Starts on.
I forgot what year. Okay, yep.
Record music on Thursday. Thursday morning we record music.
Wow, very nice.
Yeah, it's an experience.
Yeah, for the folks that are going to that, man, that get to watch this before they go, it's a great time. It really is.
And we got a couple openings. They want to go. We still got a couple openings.
Oh, I will talk to Marcia tonight. Once she gets her internet back on her TV, she'll be more likely to.
You got the shirt. You got the shirt already, anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I got the shirt.
You took mine.
I'll tell you, it's of course I do get the experience. I listen to my song that we recorded, Troubadour, a lot, but when we went to a dance in Macon a few months back, and you did not tell me, and this is a story I'll tell, and you went up there and you said, I'm going to do a song that was recorded at TOTL, and you're going through that. And I really thought you were going to do Signed, Sealed, Delivered. and I was out there dancing, and I was getting ready to dance, and I was like, and I looked at Marcia and I said, he's going to do Signed, Sealed, Delivered. He's going to do Signed, Sealed, Delivered. And then you said the guy who recorded it is in this room. I was like, oh my God, he's going to do Troubadour. And so I ran up, recorded it. And that was like when you hear the singer say, the first time I was riding on the road, I was riding in my truck and my song came on the radio. Hearing you do it was just amazing to me. And that's something I'll always remember. I've got it on my Google Drive. I'll listen to it about once a week now when I'm riding around. So you got TOTL, we got that. I've seen it because I know the concerts you go to. What's your favorite genre of music, not square dance?
70s rock and roll.
70s rock and roll. The Doobie Brothers, number one?
Doobie's number one.
Okay.
My wife's favorite group is Styx.
Styx, okay.
We see both of those groups generally several times each year.
Fantastic. Okay, I kind of thought about that. Because I've seen you post that stuff on there. What else? I had something else. Oh, and we'll get into it. Like I say, I've got no time constraints. I know you've been traveling all day, so I don't want to keep you forever. The Pride RV Resort.
What do you want to know?
I will tell you this. I was talking to Jet a while back, and I'd heard about Pride. Never went last year for the first time for your Plus Week with Jack Platties and Ted Lazat, and it's a phenomenal week of dancing and just getting to spend time with y'all also, and the dancers you have out there that come out that are regulars, I'm sure. But it is a good time. You have several weeks of square dancing out there. Just tell me a little bit about that for the people that are listening that want to dance.
Let's see. I think this year, we have 9 square dance weeks and a round dance week. Everything starts up mid-July. I think the first one is going to be a week of an A2 blast with Jet Roberts, who I think is one of the finest advanced callers, pick up a microphone. Right after that, I think we're going to have a C1 blast with Daryl Lipscomb. If you've never danced with Daryl Lipscomb, just absolutely phenomenal caller. He's one of my favorite callers. Good friend. Then the end of the month, I think we have an A2 week with Sandy Bryant and Billy Harrison.
Bill Harrison, yep.
Two more of my favorite people. Billy is one of those guys. Even now, even today, still, if I have a choreographic question, oftentimes I'll call Billy.
Okay.
Billy can explain things to me and not talk over my head. I call some of these guys and I ask them a question and then they explain it to me, and then I'm dumber after I get off the phone with them than when I started. Billy is really good at explaining it to me, and he's been that way for years. He's been my go-to guy for a lot of years with that. Let's see, and then Jet's going to be up there the first week or so of March with Ted Kennedy doing a week, and then as a plus week, and then right after that, Ted, Jack, and I will be doing a plus week with Intro to Plus DBD. Seems to be a level that everybody enjoys and likes and wants to learn.
I'll be there for that.
And then the following week after that is going to be a full bore plus DBD week, not for the faint of heart. And then on into the second week of September, Bob Asp and Kurt Braffett are doing a plus week. And then we'll close it out with a week of rounds in mid-September with one of my favorite round dance leaders in the world, Barbara and Wayne Blackford. They're one of the first. They hired me one time. They were the only round dance club to ever hire me to come in and do squares between rounds.
Wow. Very nice. Okay.
Yeah, I've called for them in Jacksonville. So they've been dear friends of mine for years. So that's our full schedule. We're really proud of it. Our hall is, we have a floating wood floor. We have, God, I have no idea how many tons of air conditioning we have, but we have enough we can freeze you in there.
Yeah.
Our floor is actually our claim to fame with our floating wood floor is years ago, the original partners in Pride were me, Jerry Story, Larry Letson, and Everett Curley were the original partners.
Okay.
And Larry retired, and as you know, Jerry passed away a couple of years ago, so it's just the two of us now. But Everett he's the brains and everything behind the whole idea of it. He has a construction company here in Charlotte, and they did all the building. He built the Pride Center, and the floor in the Pride Center. Everett for many years was involved in with several gold gems scattered around North Carolina. He was involved with the wrestler Ric Flair.
Okay.
So he and Ric Flair were very good friends. So this floor that we have in the Pride Center now is from one of those gyms. So our claim to fame is Ric Flair has perhaps walked on this floor more than one occasion. But we have a floating wood floor. I think we have the best sound of any square dance hall that I've ever been in, and I've been in a lot of square dance buildings designed just for square dancing. Jerry Story designed this sound initially when we first built the building. Jerry was the one that came up with the idea of the speaker placements and what type of speakers. And I think personally, again, I'm biased, but I think it's the best sounding square dance center that I've ever been in. It serves at several other things. So it's also a church. We have church services there on Sunday. We have all kind of meetings there throughout the year, and people rent it for other venues, stuff. And our park is great. We're sitting right in the valley in up near beautiful Waynesville, North Carolina, about 20 miles from Asheville. We have 155 RV sites, and we have we have 3, 6, 7 or 8 cabins and a half dozen or so park model trailers. So we have 1 and 2 bedroom models. So if you don't camp, you can still come and stay. We got a place for you to stay. If you can't, we'd love to have you come camp. Yeah. It's a little slice of heaven, I think, and the dancing is, you're right, the dancing is really, really nice. There's nothing like doing a square dance week where you have the same people 2 or 3 times a day. You dance every day. We have a couple of workshops and an evening dance, and the people develop friendships and bonds, and not only that, but then the dance level. As the week goes on, the people they dance so well together. So that the dance level on Thursday on the final night is unbelievable compared to what Sunday was. Right. Watch how people get better And so yeah, it's kind of cool. We enjoy it. I'm looking for our season starts in a couple of 3 months, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we stayed in the cabin when we came up last August, and really good time.
You drank a lot of bourbon that week.
We did have. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about the after parties. We can.
I just heard.
Yeah, you heard. You heard all right.
Someone told me you guys drank a lot that week.
I tell everybody.
I'm in bed by 10, so.
I tell everybody, and I'll go ahead and say it again. And if they watch these podcasts, they've heard it, and I'll say it real quick. The whole cruise you have coming up in 2023.
2024.
Next year. Yep, next year. We were in Pittsburgh, and we were sitting in the lobby, and when y'all were talking to me about that, and Jack said, it's me, Tony, Justin, and I was like, yep, I'm in. Count me in. And so I just thought that was the greatest thing. And so you've done a lot of cruises. You were telling me earlier.
Oh yeah, we've done a ton. I love cruises. In fact, we just Kim and I and Jack and his wife Sherry just went on one. Just the four of us back in February. We just went.
Okay. Well, man, I'm looking forward to that. Tony, let me say this. Love you as a caller. You're fantastic. You're a great friend. We could go on for hours. And so what I want to do is probably in about 3 or 4 months, I want to do another one of these, and we'll talk more with the stories. We'll tell more of the stories. We'll talk about what happened in Macon to me and you a couple nights ago. We won't get into that tonight. It started off really good. It ended great too. I will say that too. But so there's a lot more stories. You are gold standard, if that's a term. And I appreciate all you've done for me as a caller, and absolutely for caller. We'll talk about Caller Lab next time. We'll be at Caller Lab in about 2 weeks for the convention. So we'll talk about some stuff afterwards, and have some after party stuff. Anything else you can think of right now, Tony?
No, we'll just come back. We'll do it again. I'd love to do this thing again. This was fun. This was fun.
Tony, it's great talking to you, man. And if I don't talk to you before, I'll see you in about 2 weeks.
Right,
so for everybody that's watching, I appreciate you listening in. I hope you get a lot out of this. This was a great thing for me tonight. All my podcasts, I get to talk to friends of mine. So if you can, YouTube, Spotify, like, follow, subscribe, all that. So we've got a lot of callers coming out. This video will be out after Caller Lab. So thanks for watching. Tony, again, my brother, it's great talking to you. I'll talk to you soon. Yes, sir.
What if I mess it up, Charlie? Four ladies chain across the rain. Turn your girl. Chain the lady home, you whirl. Join up hands and you circle the while. Out left that corner, weave around that ring. I was a young troubadour. Swing that girly promenade. I'll be an old troubadour when I'm gone. 1 and 3 promenade half. Square through 4. Right on and through. Touch a quarter, follow your neighbor. Spread. All age circulate and swing. Take her by the hand and promenade round that ring. I'll be an old troubadour when I'm gone. 1 and 3 promenade half. Square through. I love this steel guitar. Right on and through and turn. Touch a quarter, follow your neighbor and spread. All age circulate and swing. Take her by the hand and promenade. I'll be an old troubadour when I'm gone. 4 ladies chain, go straight across the ring. Roll away and circle and round I sing. 4 ladies circle a while. Out in that corner you weave around the line. I was a young troubadour. Swing back, girl, in your promenade, and I'll be an old troubadour. When I'm gone, 2 and 4 promenade hand, square through, arriving on it through, touch a quarter, follow your neighbor and spread, always circulate and swing, take her by the hand and promenade round that ring. I'll be an old troubadour when I'm gone. 2 and 4 promenade half, Doug Jernigan on steel, square through to 4 G clear on pedal, or right in the left rear and turn, touch a quarter, follow your neighbor and spread, always circulate that corner you swing, take her hand and promenade round the ring. I'll be an old troubadour when I'm gone. Side space, grand square, I still feel 25. Oh, most of the time I still raise a little cane with my boys. Alabama left that corner, weave around the ring. Honky tonk and dirty women, Lord knows I'm still right there with them. I'm me, an old troubadour when I'm gone. Alabama that corner and weave go round the ring. When you meet your honey, bow to the partner and the corner of the hall. Way to go! Brand new one by Charlie. Rest your feet, guys. You done good. Would you guys please join me in welcoming Peggy Ellington for the rest of the round tonight? Such a pro to come in and just happen to have her stuff in a car and fill in at the last minute. Thank you, darling.